Welcome. Let's talk about one of the most epic stories ever told. And it's happening all around us, right now. We're diving into the infinite journey of water. And trust me, it's way more than just weather. It's this incredible story about motion, change, and, well, life itself.
It all kicks off with a really simple question. Something I'm sure you've wondered about. You see a puddle on the sidewalk, right? And then a little while later, the sun's been out and it's just gone. So, where did it go? Well, the answer to that question starts this absolutely massive journey that covers the whole planet and goes back millions of years. So, here's the key thing to get. The water on our planet, it never sits still. It's always on the move. Think of it like a giant global recycling system that we call the water cycle. And the crazy part is, there's no real start or finish line. It's just this constant, amazing loop.
And this is where it gets really wild. This idea just completely changes how you see things. Just think about it for a second. The water you use every single day, it's not new. It is ancient. It's been cycled over and over again for, well, eons, connecting us right back to the planet's deep past. I mean, less than 1% of all the water on Earth is actually fresh and easy for us to get to. The rest, it's either salt water or frozen in glaciers.
Okay, so if it's a loop, where do we jump in? How does one part of this journey even begin? Well, let's start with the escape, the Great Ascent. This is how water starts its climb from right here on the ground, way up into the sky.
The big engine driving this whole climb? It's the sun. Every single day, the sun's energy is just beaming down, and it's so powerful it evaporates over 1 trillion tons of water. Can you even picture that? This energy gives those little water molecules the jolt they need to break free, turn from a liquid into an invisible gas, we call it water vapor, and just start rising up into the air. But it's not just the oceans and lakes doing all the heavy lifting here. Plants play a massive role too. There's this process called transpiration, which is basically just plants breathing out water vapor from their leaves. And get this, a single large oak tree can pump 40,000 gallons of water into the sky in just 1 year. That's incredible.
So there you have it, right? 2 main highways to the sky. You've got evaporation, coming off all the big bodies of water, and then you've got transpiration, coming from basically every plant out there. Together, they're sending a staggering amount of invisible water vapor up into the atmosphere every single day. So, what happens to it all once it gets up there?
All right, so all that invisible water vapor is now way up high. And this is where the next part of the journey kicks in. It's the magic trick, really, where water goes from being totally unseen to creating these beautiful, massive things we see in the sky. It's pretty simple, actually. As all that warm, wet air rises higher and higher, it starts to get cold. And that cold air makes the water vapor do a U-turn. It changes its state again, going from a gas right back into these teeny tiny little droplets of liquid water. And that key process, we call it condensation. And what does condensation actually make? Well, it's stuff you see all the time. The clouds floating over your head, the thick fog on a chilly morning, even the dew on the grass. Yep, all of that is just water that has condensed right out of the air. It's the visible proof of the process.
Isn't that just mind-blowing to think about? Next time you look up at a big, fluffy cloud, remember, you're not looking at gas. You're looking at a gigantic floating collection of millions upon millions, even billions, of tiny liquid water drops. And each little water molecule, it might only hang out in the atmosphere for about 10 days before it's on to the next stage of its adventure.
Okay, so as the old saying goes, what goes up must come down. We've reached the really dramatic part of the story, the fall back to Earth. All those water droplets that gathered in the sky, it's time for them to make the return trip.
And this return trip has a name you definitely know: precipitation. What's happening is that inside that cloud, all those tiny droplets are bumping into each other, joining forces, and getting bigger and heavier. Eventually, they get so heavy that they just can't float in the air anymore. And that's when gravity says, "My turn," and pulls them back down to the ground.
And of course, this trip down can look very different, right? It all just depends on how cold it is up there. Sometimes it's a nice, gentle rain. Other times it's beautiful, delicate snowflakes. Or maybe it's icy sleet, or even those big, hard chunks of hail. But remember, it's all the same stuff. It's all water, just dressed up differently for the ride down.
So, the water's back on the ground. Journey's over, right? Nope, not even close. In fact, a whole new part of the adventure is just getting started. This is where the water completes the circuit, traveling all across the land and even deep down below it.
So once it lands, water has a few choices for where to go next. It doesn't just stay put. Some of it will start flowing over the land. That's what we call runoff. Some of it will gather together in lakes and oceans, and a whole lot of it will soak right into the ground, which is called infiltration. The main takeaway here, it is always moving.
Let's just break that down real quick. Runoff? That's the water you see rushing down the street into a drain or a stream after it rains. Collection is pretty straightforward. That's when the water ends up in a big spot, like a lake or the ocean. And infiltration, that's a super important one. That's the water soaking down into the earth, refilling the groundwater that pretty much everything relies on.
So, we've followed this water on its incredible, epic journey. But what's the big deal? Why does all of this matter so much? Well, to put it simply, this endless cycle is the engine. It's the engine that powers all life on Earth.
I mean, think about it. Without this constant motion, life as we know it just couldn't exist. This cycle is what cleans and delivers fresh water to every single living thing, from a tiny blade of grass to a giant whale. It's also like the planet's thermostat, moving heat around to help control our climate. It is the one process that, fundamentally, makes Earth a living, breathing planet.
This pretty much says it all, doesn't it? And that's not being overly dramatic. It's the absolute truth. The infinite journey we've just been talking about, it's not just some cool science lesson. It is the reason we're all here. Period.
So, the next time you pick up a glass of water, just take a second and think about its story. That water has seen ages. It's been in clouds, in oceans, in rivers. It might have even been sipped by a dinosaur. It is on a truly infinite journey. And now that it's a part of your story, the really fun question to ask is, where's it going to go next?